Pull rates are a major part of what gives a Pokemon card set value. As we've seen in sets like Scarlet and Violet base, if the hits are easier to pull, then the sealed product and singles won't hold as much value, especially in comparison to sets with tougher pull rates like Fusion Strike and Lost Origin. In the most recent set, Twilight Masquerade, we've seen pull rates get a lot trickier than what we had in previous Scarlet and Violet sets. In return, I think this is a huge reason why Twilight Masquerade is maintaining value rather than dropping like a lot of the other sets have shortly after release. To get right into it, let's take a look at some of the pull rate data that TCG Player has compiled. For Twilight Masquerade, the main changes were to the hyper rares and special illustration rares. The hyper rare pull rate has been upped to 1 in 146 packs. And I really love what TCG Player is doing right now with giving you the average pull rate of getting one of these hyper rares and also giving you a specific by kind of multiplying the amount there are out there. In Twilight Masquerade, there's 6 different hyper rares. So to pull a specific one of those, it's 1 in 876. You also have the SIRs, which got a lot harder to pull in this set. You're looking at 1 in about 86 packs, or to pull a specific one, it's 1 in 941. That's because having the pull rate so much more difficult in this set rather than the beginning of Scarlet and Violet era and having 11 different SIR cards, it's going to be really tricky to pull that specific one you're looking for. We'll also touch on the illustration rares. The pull rate hasn't really been affected. It's about, 1 in 12, 1 in 13 packs. You're usually getting 3 per booster box, which would be 3 in 36 or 1 in 12 packs. Twilight Masquerade only has 21 illustration rares. That seems like a lot, but if you look at sets like Paradox Rift, which had 34, it's not really that many. To pull a specific illustration rare, like say you're going for that Eevee, if you open 272 packs and hit perfect odds, you should get one of every illustration rare. And like I said, the pull rates for the illustration rares have not changed. Even going back to SV Base or Obsidian Flames, it's still 1 in 13. The only thing that really changes is the chance of getting a specific one. That's why you see cards in Paradox Rift like the Groudon and in Paldea Evolved like the Magikarp seeing such high value. It's because it gets really tricky to pull that specific illustration rare. In Paradox Rift, you're looking at about 1 in 442, and that's because there are 13 more illustration rares. It's about 40% more illustration rares in Paradox Rift than Twilight Masquerade. So that pull rate, you're not really changing the amount you're pulling. You're still going to get, 3 per booster box, 1 in every 13 or so packs. But the fact that there's 13 more of them makes it a lot more difficult to pull. Staying on the topic of illustration rares, if you look back at Obsidian Flames, for example, there's only 12 illustration rares, and none of them are really that valuable. To compare, we'll put the top 3 illustration rares of each set. Obsidian Flames, to start with, is the Ninetales, which is only holding about $9 in value. Paradox Rift, as I just mentioned, has the Groudon, which is up to about $58. And Twilight Masquerade, of course, is Eevee at $40. Twilight Masquerade's prices could change a lot. It's only been out for about a month now. But with the pull rates being the same as other sets, I don't really see cards in Twilight Masquerade really overshooting what we have in Paradox Rift or Paldea Evolved. So go back to SIRs, the main, draw of these sets. The big chase cards are usually SIRs. In Twilight Masquerade, you have 11 of them. But because that pull rate is 1 in 86, it's a lot harder to pull a specific one. In Paradox Rift, you have 15 SIRs, but the pull rate is a lot lower. It's 1 in 47. 1 in 47 compared to 1 in 86. It's about a 40 pack difference. Even though there's 4 more special illustrations, it's a 1 in 712 chance of hitting a specific SIR rather than the 1 in 941 over in Twilight. And to bounce back one more to Obsidian Flames, unfortunately TCG Player wasn't really breaking down the specific pull rates, but SIRs were 1 in 32. It wasn't uncommon to hit 2 of them in a booster box. I pulled the Charizard and the Gita in one booster box, which are 1 in 216 cards. They also put the Pidgeot on this list at 188. So you're really looking at like a 1 in 200 pack, which is massively different than 1 in 700 or 1 in 940. Just like illustration rares, let's look at the top SIR from each set. To start, Obsidian Flames, you're looking at $45 for that special illustration rare Charizard. You know, this card is like really not worth too much at all. You could pretty much buy every card in the set for cheaper than a booster box. Paradox Rift, you have the Roaring Moon at 65, and Twilight Masquerade, you got that Greninja holding strong at 165. It has been sort of steady. It's gone up, it's gone down, but not by like a big amount, and it keeps rebounding to pretty much where it was on release. You know, Twilight is a pretty new set, but due to these pull rates, I think a lot of these cards are going to maintain. You know, I don't think the Greninja is the best SIR card we've gotten. It's really cool, though. It's definitely in the top 5. Carmine and Perrin as well. Same with Blood Moon, Ursaluna even. Just because they're so tricky to pull, I think is maintaining the value. We'll also touch briefly on the gold cards or hyper rares. With Twilight Masquerade, they've bumped up like crazy to 1 in 146. If that's accurate, that's 1 hyper rare in every 4 booster boxes, which is kind of crazy to think about when it was like basically 1 in every box or every other box with previous sets. Even like Paradox Rift, for example. I keep using Paradox Rift. That's because that was kind of the set where Pokemon realized, oh, we have a pull rate issue. The big cards are too easy to pull and nobody really cares. The sets aren't selling. We needed a chase, right? Like Evolving Skies, you got the Moonbrown. You got really difficult cards to pull in Evolving Skies. You might open a whole booster box and pull like nothing of any value, maybe a rainbow card, right? You know, when I was opening Obsidian Flames, right, my first Obsidian Flames box, I pulled pretty much half of the cards on this sheet here that TCG player has. I pulled the Charizard SIR, I pulled the Gita, I pulled the Ninetales, I pulled the Cleffa all in one box. Then like a week later, I bought a booster pack and I pulled the Pidgeot. I think it's like generous to say I opened 60 packs of Obsidian Flames and I've pulled pretty much everything there is to get in that set. You know, I pulled the Scizor. There's multiple cards that I hit like pretty quick, and you know, I opened 1 booster box of that set and just like never really bought any packs. I didn't even go for an ETB. Usually I do booster box and ETB, buy some singles, buy some packs here and there. 3rd pack in, I pulled the Charizard and I was like, I was lucky, but at the same time it's like the chase is over. I don't care anymore. And because of that, I haven't even paid attention to Obsidian Flames. I don't really care for the set. Yeah, it's cool. There's great hits in the illustration rares, but it's too easy to pull the cards you want. And with Paradox Rift, they kind of corrected that. Even 151 a little bit, I saw personally tougher pull rates. I was opening ETBs and getting like 1 or 2 hits, and that's out of like 9 packs, right? But with Paradox Rift, that's when they were like, okay, you're not going to get like 2 SIRs in a box. There's a lot more illustration rares. There's, you know, gold cards are going to get a lot trickier to come by. You know, they upped the pull rate from 1 in 52 to 1 in 82 on the golds from Obsidian Flames to Paradox Rift. The SIRs went up 15 from 1 in 32 to 1 in 47. So they were kind of trying to find that sweet spot. Even with Temporal Forces, it went a bit farther than that. But Twilight Masquerade is getting really tricky. You know, a lot of gold cards don't really hold value. It seems like nowadays, it's if there's a really competitive card, that's the one people want, like the Buddy Buddy Poffin. I feel like that's going to be a card in everyone's deck probably for the next 2 to 3 years. In Paradox Rift, you got the Counter Catcher, which is, you know, not too expensive. It's like $10. And Obsidian Flames, it's the Charizard, you know, obviously just because it's the Charizard. And from there, it's Artisan, the Stadium, which is like $2. Now, to make the big comparison, like why I think Twilight Masquerade is not going to follow a similar pattern we saw, you know, last year in 2023 with SV Base, Paldea Evolved, Obsidian Flames. You know, Paldea Evolved I'm not really touching on in this video because it's such a big set. There's so many like chase cards. You know, chase, they're not like the greatest cards out there, but they're harder to pull because there's so many of them, just like this whole pull rate data, you know. If you have like 20 SIRs as opposed to 11, it's going to be a lot harder to pull one of those 20. Yeah, pull rates might be easier, but it's still tough to get that specific card you want. The chase for the Magikarp is a lot trickier because there's so many illustration rares. But looking at all those sets, you know, on release, they tanked pretty hard. A lot of the chase cards tanked. They haven't really sustained. They might go up eventually, you know, over time as sets sell out and people aren't opening them as much anymore and there's less chance of getting them. The singles will go up a little bit. Some won't, but the chase cards will. But if we compare Twilight Masquerade to sets like Lost Origin or Fusion Strike that were kind of notorious for having tougher pull rates, there are actually some similarities. If we look at TCG players' data on 8,000 packs of Lost Origin, I averaged out the alternate art pull rate to about 1 in 830. So if you're looking for a specific card, like say that Giratina, TCG player says, 1 in 720. But if you average that out with the other three, like all four alternate arts, you're looking at more like 1 in 830. And that's to pull a specific. That's not just to pull any. Twilight Masquerade, it's actually trickier. 1 in 940. It's 110 packs tougher to pull a specific SIR. If you're just looking for a special illustration rare in general, like if you don't care which one it is, you just want to hit one. With Lost Origins, it's like 1 in 210 packs. With Twilight Masquerade, 1 in 86. So it is easier to pull that rarity in general. But if you're looking for only the Greninja, if you just want the Greninja, it's actually harder to pull just the Greninja. You'd have to open way more packs than it would be to hit a Giratina. Now again, this is just based off of the data that TCG Player has supplied. It could not be the same for everyone. You might open a booster box of Twilight and pull the Greninja in your first pack. You might open 2 cases of Lost Origin and not hit the Giratina, right? It's always up to chance. There's just a very low percentage of you hitting the card you're chasing. If you go back to Fusion Strike, obviously the V and VMAX both had alternate arts in that set. For the Vs, it was like 1 in 670 to pull a specific. For the VMAX, it was more like 1 in 1,400. That's ridiculous. But as we know, there was a lot of batching issues, theft from the factory. I think just the way Fusion Strike was distributed had a whole lot of issues that were kind of out of everybody's control, and that's what affected the pull rates so negatively. But with Twilight Masquerade, what I'm trying to say is it seems like the Pokemon Company is kind of trying to bring the chase cards, the special illustration rares, more to the standard of what alternate arts were, which I think is what we expected going into the era. It was really exciting opening Scarlet and Violet base right after, Crown Zenith and having, such great pulls. You were getting a lot of stuff. But if you're going to be pulling, an SIR every 15 packs or every 30 packs, the value is not going to be there. If it's like 1 in 100 or 1 in 200 like Lost Origin, you're going to see heavy value. I'm not saying that the Greninja will necessarily end up being like the Giratina or the Gengar, for example. I think there's potential there. I don't know if it is such a popular Pokemon. I'm leaning towards it's not, especially because this is a Terra type special illustration. People don't seem to like the Terra types, and I think that's going to negatively impact the value long term. But again, I think this is the best Terra type illustration rare, SIR we've gotten. So based off of Greninja being popular, based off this being the nicest of its kind of grouping so far, there is potential that it's going to hold strong value. Giratina strong or Gengar strong? I don't think so. And when we're looking at value, in terms of the sealed product, I think the tough pull rates are going to be a plus in the long term for Twilight Masquerade. If you're sitting on like a booster box, I wouldn't say invest in it now. The set's been out for what, a month and a half. I don't think it's worth getting into now, maybe 3-6 months down the line when the focus is on the next set or what's going to be coming in the future with Team Rocket or Stellar Miracle or whatever we got going on. But with the tough pull rates and a few good chases in the Greninja, the Perrin, the Carmine, the Eevee, I think the sealed product will have more value than a set like, SV Base, obviously, or Paradox Rift, possibly, Temporal Forces. There are a lot of cards that negatively impact this set, like all the Ogre Pawns, for example. And I don't think this is going to be the best Scarlet and Violet era set. I think we're going to see some crazy stuff next year in 2025. Leave a comment below if you want to hear my predictions on what Pokemon might be bringing to the TCG going into next year. All right, guys, that's kind of it for today. Just to summarize, the pull rates in Twilight Masquerade are a lot more difficult than we're used to with Scarlet and Violet, and I think that is kind of the sole reason why this set is maintaining some value or even staying ahead of a lot of other cards and a lot of other sets. I don't think any of us expected the Greninja to be at $165 a month after release. Same with Carmine and Perrin, they've all stayed strong. But that just shows why pull rates are so important in making a set valuable. Alright guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below on how you feel about the pull rates going into Twilight Masquerade as opposed to what we had in sets like Obsidian Flames. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.